Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Joe Biden continues to assemble what would be his administration's team, including the comm shop. Did you see who's heading up the comm shop? Putting the band back together everywhere on the foreign policy front and the economics front, as well as in the comms front.
It's all Obama has-beens. I mean, it's 7 women are in charge of his communications department. Not one man is on that team. And if I was a man, I'd be upset. Gender bias behavior.
Yeah, well, fortunately, the male impersonators of the left notwithstanding, there's no man who's interested in being
hanging out with
part of that Seven Sisters of the Apocalypse crowd. There, I'll tell you that right now.
All the CNN commentators are getting yanked to go back to Washington.
Well, maybe one of the Fox News contributors named Marie Harf will be too, so that Jen Psaki and Marie Harf can renew their Cagney and Lacey of the left, that routine that they did at the State Department under Obama.
Yeah.
Also, this from the Babylon Bee, the paper of record for this Biden administration, if there is to be one. Biden all-female communications team won't tell the nation what's wrong. Nation should already know. Perfect.
That's good.
And the economics front, Neera Tanden is being described as the head of a center-left organization called the Center for American Progress, which is not center-left. There's nothing center about it. It's just hard left. She has a lot of interesting. She's been tabbed to be the Office of Management and Budget Director.
Very important role.
She does not worry about debt and deficits. She does.
Oh.
There's no
go.
problem there. She basically said that any concern for the has previously said any concern for the debt is mostly tactical. She has said that
deficits and debt pose no comparable risk.
She's also a climate obsessive. In October of last year, she tweeted support for a proposal with sector-specific deployment policies, trillions of dollars in direct federal spending, economy-wide price on carbon, mandatory emissions reductions in communities historically overburdened by pollution, and so on and so forth. She has drawn some criticism from the left as well, so maybe she doesn't survive a Senate confirmation. We'll see.
And wasn't she the one who deleted like 1,000 tweets because of her past Twitter behavior?
Yeah. She's much another unifying figure that will punctuate a potential Biden administration, as well as the old Obama economists. You got Captain Kangaroo, who's going to go to Treasury, and you got Jared Bernstein, the architect of the Obama stimulus, who predicted that that rather modest bailout by today's standards of $750 billion would push the unemployment rate below 7% by the autumn of 2010. He was off by about 60%. It was at 10% at that time. You have other Keynesians of various stripes and climate tinkerers and central planners and so forth that make up this team. So you're going to see massive spend. Oh, by the way, you also have one, just FYI, because she's gotten some profile. Cecilia Rouse, she would be his point person for the White House Council of Economic Advisors. She's from Princeton, another Keynesian from Princeton. She has focused in part on subjects like education and the labor market, and her research is skeptical of the benefits of school choice. So she's a school choice opponent, just factoring that in as well, getting into education policy at the federal level in terms of the 180 that you would potentially see from Trump to Biden.
And back, back to Tanden. She was once accused of becoming physically aggressive toward a staffer who dared to question Hillary Clinton about the Iraq War. And she once outed an employee who filed a sexual harassment complaint.
Yeah.
So that's going to speak to her, competency. Her physical fitness to have a leadership role in this organization.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by CNBC contributor Jim Iuorio. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think of this team of best and brightest that Biden has assembled so far?
Well, when she said that the deficits don't matter, And if you turn the question to me and saying, do I think the deficits matter? It doesn't matter what I think. Bitcoin is screaming at us right now that deficits do, in fact, matter, as is the gold market. And you can even throw in that stocks are as well. That's part of the whole theme that's been going on these last 7 or 8 months, is that if the government and the Federal Reserve as well is going to be cavalier with currency policies, which they absolutely are, then you have to find alternatives for a weaker dollar. And the dollar's been on a one-way path lower, not just measured against the basket of currencies, because that's measured against other currencies that are engaged in the same sort of malarkey. I wanted to use the word malarkey there. Bam! I think I nailed it. I think that makes me hip.
Yeah, like that's very Biden-esque.
Yeah, it's very 2020. No, but I think they're involved in the same sort of things. And so that's not even a good measure of the dollar. The dollar is definitely going lower if you give a broad measure of it. And in that measure, you'd have to measure it against things like Bitcoin, gold, silver, things that people are using as proxies for fiat currency. Now, but the point is that, like she said, right now, deficits don't matter. That's the only thing I would say. If we had a government that did not have cavalier currency policies in normal times, this would be a time, provided that they are definitely putting these, some would call draconian policies to lock down people for extended periods of time. It was the right time then to make up with that with extra spending, as long as we're confident that that will go away as we come out of this. I'm not confident of that at all, and neither is the Bitcoin market.
Yeah, well, so it seems to me if you're thinking about staying in the market or putting all your money in Bitcoin, you stay in the market in the short term, perhaps, under the thinking that, look, we have rent seekers all around a Biden administration. We have a spendthrift Congress, and we would a White House if Biden is installed. And so they'll prop up. I mean, the corporate rent seekers combined with the profligate spenders in D.C. will continue to prop up this market until it collapses. And I'll bet that it won't collapse for a little while yet. So I'll stay in and expect to see the averages continue to bump up.
Well, that's been my theory the whole time, too. But I'm going to throw in something that might not be the most popular thing on this show and in our circles, is that the Trump administration was spendthrift as well. I mean, they racked up a tremendous amount of debt in a time where it didn't seem like they really needed to. Of course, our economy needs a lot of government spending and low rates just because of over-regulation that's at 4 different levels. I've never seen that as clearly as I have with the restaurant, that when we bought it 8 years ago, just being regulated by the federal government, the state, the county, the local town, and every that makes small businesses, and I assume medium and large size businesses too, based on my experiences, difficult to really navigate those waters. So the domestic economy needs to be pushed along by the Fed and by extra government spending. And that always ends badly. It just takes a lot of time. And I always think of it as we're sailing the boat nearer and nearer to the waterfall. And, at some point in time, when it begins to happen, and this all goes back to the modern monetary theory thing that we've talked about on this show like 4 or 5 times, when this begins to happen, it's too late to reverse it. So you have to be careful with your currency. I mean, history just has mountains of evidence against people who are, the pride cometh before the fall, and our currency is the reserve, and nothing's going to challenge it right up until the point that it does.
But then you throw in COVID, and places like New York, 30% of small businesses closing for good, not just during this pandemic, but they're never going to reopen again. And what is that going to do to the tax base? I mean, think of, big cities like New York, Chicago. Are they going to have to tax business owners more to make up for that revenue?
Of course, that's it. I mean, remember, if you ever study the downfall of Detroit, when they started to have less and less revenues, they just continued to raise taxes, creating that cycle. And that's why, cities like that are going to have a very, very difficult time. And now the restaurant part of that, and I know we talk about restaurants a lot, and I'm in that business. I don't mean to, but restaurants is a huge part of our economy. And up until this point, everyone was fighting against the weather and sitting outside with heat lamps and tents, and that's not going to happen for the next 3 months. And there's no talk of any government stimulus there's talk of it, but there's no real talk of it for any more government stimulus for restaurants. And again, I'm not worried about my restaurant. My restaurant does fine, and it's the competitors that are having a difficult time. I talk to restaurateurs all the time who are a hair away from closing their doors for good.
Yeah, but so why don't we just look at this in a Schumpeterian way and say, These are just the creative gales of destruction in a market economy, given this is a government-induced gale that's creating this destruction. But there'll be opportunities that abound once the...
But it's not an invisible hand. It's a very, very visible...
It's very visible. It's a visible fist, actually.
It's a visible fist. It's giving a knockout punch to business. And I don't mean to chuckle about it all, because it's no laughing matter, of course, right?
Yeah, but what about... But so, they'll snap back once the dust settles, and the strongest will survive, and there's no problem here.
Not only will the strongest survive, it's going to be an enormous roll-up to the strongest will be the only one survive. So we talk about wealth inequality, and you want to branch that down to like in small business. The businesses that are good and are going out of business because they were leveraged a bit, and in normal times they would have done fine. Those are going to be taken over, and there's going to be more accumulation, and all of a sudden there's just going to be chains, because some of those were the ones that had deep enough pockets to take out everybody else. And that's not just the restaurant industry is a metaphor for that. That happens everywhere. This has been such an enormous roll-up of power and money from the middle to the top, and not just in industry. Think about it in risk assets too. Everyone that's going out of business, people are unemployment's at some points in time all-time spikes, and the government throws money at it. Most of that money ends up in risk assets, whether it be property, stocks, Bitcoin, gold, which are the things that the wealthy own. So the wealthy have done extremely well in this at the expense of the middle, and that's in business and personally.
It seems to me this is a key point, because it's when the government steps in, now you have force being delivered to extract from some and give to others, and it's not the Marxist utopian world of from those who have to those who need. No, it's in point of fact from those who have a little to those who have a lot. So these government policies, we talked about this in the context of schools or the economy. Oh, go ahead and shut down the schools because I'm rich and I have choices. Go ahead and shut down the economy because I'm rich and I have choices. Government policy here has done exactly opposite of what most of the politicians prattle on about, which is protecting the middle and those who need a helping hand or those who need opportunity. It's squelched opportunity. It's squeezed the middle for the benefit of those who don't need the help but are happy to take the benefits. I mean, this is perhaps the greatest example of backdoor rent-seeking in American history.
No, there's no question about it, and anyone who wants to take the other side of that debate will do so at their own peril. They're going to lose that. We're not all in this together, and every time you hear those words uttered, it's by people who are either wealthy and their assets are shooting through the roof, they're government employees who it's absolutely guaranteed paycheck, but they're not the people who are truly affected by this is the middle on down, particularly the people in the service industry who have just been wiped out. And they think, oh, we'll just give them extra unemployment or we'll give them universal basic income, which, by the way, universal basic income, I think, is one of the whole major points of this thing is that if it all gets too bad, we'll just throw that in. And that is a yoke, and that is people don't understand. Everybody thinks they want a paycheck without working. I don't think that's a great idea at all.
AOC said last week, pay people to stay home.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, people who aren't producing and contributing to society. Let's have a bunch of people like that. That sounds like a really good mental and emotional way to go through life. I hate even the sound of it.
I know. People need to do what they love. So, Jim, if the Democrats take the House and the Senate, what do you think is going to happen to the stock market?
Well, that's when I think it could have trouble. The stock market definitely likes a government that's not able to do things. The stock market's not stupid. They like everything that the government does, as we said before. Not everything, I'm being hyperbolic, but most of the things the government does, they have negative effects. So if we had a Democrat in the White House and a Republican Senate, I think it's the best of all worlds because they're going to spend like drunken sailors, but they're also not going to push through any of those huge tax plans. If the Democrats get the Senate, and remember, too, the tax plans based on their own modern monetary theory, taxing corporations and taxing the wealthy, all that's supposed to do is make those people less wealthy. They don't need, by their own definitions, they don't need those tax revenues to run the country. They can run deficits till the cows come home. They can run $100 trillion debt, and they're fine with that. So those taxes that they're talking about are mostly just punitive. Again, that's not my opinion. That's based on the theories that they've all bowed to.
With respect to the financial crisis we weren't in really prior to COVID, but that we have walked ourselves into now, So, what do you look for as sort of signs of the gathering storm when it comes to a recession or something even more substantial? Is it the housing prices that are up right now across the nation, making an about face? What are the indicators you're watching as we move forward into more uncharted territory?
Okay, so we have bubbles in a lot of different things. You mentioned housing; they're beginning there. But what I'm looking for is one specific thing that has a bubble that's unsustainable and becomes prone to a pop or a crash. Right now, it seems like we're threading a very strange needle. Which, by the way, this won't go on forever because it seems like impossible that's happening. That we're creating bubbles in all kinds of different things. Well, if there's bubbles created in all kinds of different things, then the risk is spread out, and I don't see it cracking for a while. So I'm going to be looking at things that are inflating. And I don't think, Bitcoin, I think its market cap right now totally is about $300 billion. And that's just a guess, so I don't want to be correct on that. But anyway, it's nothing huge that if it pops and gets wiped out, that it's going to drag the whole economy with it. The housing market and the stock markets are the big enough assets that could do that. Of course, the bond market as well. But if the Fed keeps buying the bonds, I don't see how that crash is ever going to happen. So I'm worried about something inflating too much, as we've seen twice before with tech stocks in 2000 and then with real estate again in 07, something inflating too much, people all talking about how they're leveraging up, buying into it, and then all of a sudden that's going to crack and drag everyone down into the hole with it. I don't think I'm still long the stocks. I think, and it's not for all the wrong reasons. I'm long the stocks because you have to be in risk assets because the government keeps pushing people further and further out the risk curve. But that's what I'm going to be watching for. But I don't think it happens for a while.
He is Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor and owner of Brant's in Palatine. Jim, thanks so much for joining us as always.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Holiday air travel surging despite health warnings. New home contracts fell for a second month. Food delivery company DoorDash set to launch its IPO. Those stories next. You've all probably heard of asbestos and know that it's dangerous. And you may also know exposure to asbestos is the only known cause of mesothelioma, a deadly cancer. People who were exposed to asbestos decades ago are being diagnosed to this day with mesothelioma. That's because it can take as many as 30 or even 50 years to develop. But did you also know there's money to pay victims of asbestos exposure from years ago? An estimated $30 billion available to help compensate victims and their families. If you or a member of your family have been diagnosed with mesothelioma, you may be able to receive some of this money without ever going to court or filing a lawsuit. Get a free legal review today. Call Sokolov Law at 800-910